In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast, we are going to cover some of the top prospects who shined and stood out in the summer of 2024 in international play. My guy, NBA Draft Point, Alec Kichian, is back on, and he's going to give his top 5 performers of the summer. Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, with my co-host for today. NBA Draft Point is back, Alec Kichian, and we're going to talk about some of the top players that shined and stood out in FIBA Player International play this summer. But before we get into this episode, I want to let you know that it is brought to you by FanDuel. And now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet just $5, just $5. You can get a 3-week free trial of the NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com to get started. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, like, share, comment. That is the best way to help us grow the channel because basketball season is in full effect. We are coming at you 5 days a week. Because, like I said, basketball season is around the corner, which means it is the end of the FIBA summer cycle. I know for me, basketball season doesn't end during the spring. Of course, you got NBA playoffs, but during the summer is where I spend a lot of my time watching some of the top international prospects and some of the American prospects that are playing in FIBA tournaments. And there's nobody better to talk about FIBA and international play than Mr. I keep saying NBA Draft Point, but is that the name on Twitter? Is the NBA Draft Point?
Yeah, that's the name. I mean, in the beginning when I tried to put that as my handle, they didn't really let me. So I went with Draft Point 2024, but NBA Draft Point is what I go by, yeah.
NBA Draft Point. Alec Kichian. The first episode he came on, I guess it was last week, did pretty well. Got a lot of love on Twitter. You've made an incredible name for yourself this summer on
Appreciate
social
it.
media. I get a lot of people reaching out to me saying, hey, what can I do? I cover the draft. I write. What can I do to stand out? And I always tell them, like, you did it in like a summer. You made a name for yourself. You've even had some NBA teams reaching out. So that's pretty impressive.
Thanks.
So first, I wanted to stay here in America. I know you're Canadian, but we'll stay here in North America. The top 2 prospects for you as far as how they played this summer were Cameron Boozer and AJ Dybantsa. Now, they just had an incredible showing last weekend. Who is your number 1 prospect out of those 2 and why? I'm putting you on the hot seat.
All right, so I've thought about this, and for me, for right now, it's Cam Boozer, just because of how dominant, efficient, and consistent he's been over the last few years as a top prospect. He's a big man, 6'8". In FIBA, he was amazing. He was like the main part of the Team USA team. He averaged 20 and 10, 2 steals, 70% from the field in 20 minutes of play. Went undefeated, took home the MVP in an insanely dominant fashion. Nobody could stop him. So for me, over the summer, Cameron Boozer did look the best. I know that AJ Dybantsa, his length and his fluidity at 6'8" is tantalizing, but for me, historically, I'm going to take Cam Boozer, especially during the summer.
Yeah, it's been a debate. Me and my brother did
Mhm.
a podcast about it on Monday, and I had mentioned that I'm a big AJ fan, but if I needed to win one game, I would go with Cam Boozer.
Mhm.
And there's been quite a few people that have been hitting me up saying I'm crazy, and AJ is the next T Mac, and then Cam Boozer is an athletic. I mean, it's weird to me, and I don't know if it was your post I saw, but I saw somebody post something on Twitter and basically they were saying that Cam Boozer is underrated in a sense. I mean, if you look at his resume, it's hard to find a more impressive resume from high school to AAU to even when you factor in FIBA play. And so I think it's going to be an acquired taste. I don't think you can go wrong with either prospect. But Cameron Boozer's resume, I guess it's the equivalent of Ethan Almanza's resume in Spain. Like
Pretty
Ethan,
much.
won like MVP of what the 17s, 18s, and 19s, and like 2 summers, and he's won. And I mean, Boozer's won like Peach Jam. He's won state championships. He's won gold medals. And I mean, his resume is crazy. So if you had to go with the top pick in 2026, you would go with Boozer, or does it depend on the team?
Depends on the team. I'm not exactly there yet during the 2026 draft. There's still a lot of intangibles to kind of like look through. But at the moment, as a prospect in high school, I'm taking Cam Boozer. AJ, he's special. Like the way he plays, and even in FIBA, he looked really, really good. Like with it, they both played 20 minutes a game. Cam Boozer was the de facto number one option. But AJ, like what he showed in that tournament, I was impressed by. Like I saw that, I mean, usually he isn't the biggest playmaker in high school because he is the guy, doesn't really
Yeah.
need to. But in this tournament, he averaged 14, 4, and 4 on good efficiency, I think above 50% field goal. And for him, like the passing is kind of what impressed me in this tournament, or it stood out to me compared to his other performances in the way that I mean, it was a lot of easy passes, like just sending up to Cam Boozer, like lobbing it up to him. But that team there is insanely stacked. Might be one of the best U18 teams ever, or one of the best U18 teams ever, with AJ, the Boozer brothers, JJ Manquid, Pete, those guys.
Tyron
Their
Stokes.
Tyron Stokes.
Yeah.
Their margin of victory is crazy. I think it's like they're winning every game by like 40, 50. So
Yeah. Now, what stood out to you from watching them in FIBA that you may not have seen from them in regular high school or AAU? I know with AJ you mentioned the passing. Was there anything that Boozer did that caught your attention that stood out to you that you hadn't seen from him?
I mean, for him, it's the flat out dominance of just getting into a game and being able to do literally whatever he wants. Like a man among kids, just playing with his foot up there. Like he gets in the post and it's an automatic bucket, either dunks it or catches a lob or hits a few post moves and he's automatically there. He felt decent from three. I believe it was like 33%, something like that. And I mean, it wasn't his main weapon in this tournament. I think a lot of Team USA, they just tried to overwhelm them with their size. But I think, again, the dominance for me is what kind of put him at number one in this entire tournament of playing 20 minutes, putting up 20 and 70% from the field. And that's just crazy for me. Like,
Yeah, I mean he dominates literally everywhere. Like he's
mhm.
dominated. Somebody had brought it up to me that he played the Thompson twins a few years ago when they were at OTE, and he was like, was it a freshman or a sophomore? And in this person's opinion, they thought he was the best player on the floor. Do you remember that particular game?
Bits, but like I remember covering the Thompson twins. That was the first year I was kind of going more in depth with the draft prospects and all that. But I do kind of remember like hearing about that and seeing a bit of it and being like, yeah, this guy is going to be special in a few years.
What about AJ? You mentioned the passing, and I've heard people say that they think that he could struggle if he's not being featured. And I think that he showed that he can play in a
Hmm.
situation where he's not heavily featured. Now, I will say the Team USA was so dominant that even if he wasn't featured, he was going to be able to get points off of like transition and getting out on the open floor. One of the things that I wanted to see, and I remember back, I want to say it was the 2018 or 2019 under 19 team that was super loaded. And I was actually at that tournament in Greece. It was Cade Cunningham. Evan Mobley was on the team, but he didn't play. Tyrese, I was going to say Proctor, but Tyrese Halliburton, um, Jalen Green was on that team. Scotty Barnes was on that team. And one of the things that I wanted to see with AJ was if he was going to kind of struggle a little bit like I'm sorry, Jalen Green did. Jalen Green, in my opinion, in that tournament, I mean, the numbers looked good, but to me, it looked like he struggled a little bit when he wasn't featured, when he wasn't the man. He didn't start. He came off the bench. Again, he was able to score just by being more athletic than guys, getting out in the open floor. But I felt like there were times he was trying to force things. And so with AJ, that's what I was looking at. I was looking at seeing, was he trying to force things? Was he going to take some bad shots, or was he going to be able to score in the flow? And of course, it's AJ. A bad shot for him or a bad shot for most people is an easy shot for him. But were there any concerns watching him and seeing how he can fit in if he's not heavily featured?
I mean, I'm gonna say not really, just because I think this team has continuity and they've played together for a while, these group of guys. They've been dominant together for so long that I feel like he kind of got used to playing within this group and the dynamic of this group. I mean, I thought he looked good. I think there's obviously some shots that it looks kind of crazy, like you said, that you wonder like, oh, maybe should he take that? But it is AJ Dybantsa. But I think he looked pretty good, especially this year. Like the margin for error is kind of big because they were so dominant, but for him, I think he fit pretty well in this team and he contributed a lot more to team play and looked like kind of more how you'd expect him to look at a higher level than how he does right now at Utah.
Yep, I agree. All right, when we return, we're going to move over to the other side of the pond. We're going to talk about three French prospects that you felt stood out and really made a name for themselves this summer. But before we get into the French side of this episode, I want to talk to you about Game Time because Game Time is my favorite app when it comes to purchasing tickets. And it's not just tickets for sporting events. Game Time helps you find tickets for plays, theaters, comedies, and more. And what I love about Game Time is that they have this feature with all-in pricing. It shows you the total up front. There's no surprise fees at checkout. And you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you're going to be sitting and you're going to know your view before you even purchase the ticket. They also have the lowest price guarantee. And if it's not the lowest price, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And that's what I call standing on business. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use the redeem code LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app. What time is it? Game time. All right. Once again, thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. Now, check out the Locked On NBA podcast because there's no off season. Locked On NBA. I keep wanting to say Locked On NBA Big Board, but the Locked On NBA podcast provides daily basketball analysis. You get the national and you get the local experts, and you get it in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed or as entertained as Locked On NBA. It is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, we're talking about summer standouts, guys that had some strong performances in international play this summer. And Nolan Traore, I thought that his play this summer was okay, but maybe I felt like it was okay because he was so dominant in the spring at the ANGTs. What makes Traore on this list? Is it like part of what he did in the spring from the Adidas Next Generation tournament to the Nike Hoop Summit? Or was it just strictly what you saw from him in FIBA play where he led the tournament in assists?
It's a bit of both. I think he showed the extent of his scoring in the summer or during the ANGT, and now he showed a different facet of his game, which is the playmaking. He was a good playmaker in the Adidas Next Generations tournament, but the playmaking really did stand out. And I mean, it's kind of like he didn't try to score as much because he wasn't inefficient. He shot well,
Yep.
shot 50% from the field, 42% from three. And during that last game when it was do or die, against Lithuania, he turned up. I
He
think he
got
had
busy.
29 points, 11 assists, 11 of 17 field goals, something like that. But he really showed that he can do it, and I think that's why he kind of took like less of the scoring load during the summer. But I think the playmaking really did stand out to me.
Yeah, I mean, he had a 40, I think 45-point game in the ANGTs. Then he ends up playing in FIBA play, leads the tournament in assists. Were there any concerns? It's like 4.7 turnovers per game, if I remember correctly. And I know he averaged over 9 assists, but were there any concerns with the decision making and the high turnovers?
Too much. I think that, I mean, when he took the role of the playmaker or being more of a playmaker, it's going to come naturally that, I mean, the more usage he gets as a playmaker, the more turnovers he's going to like potentially get. I think there were some decision-making problems, but I mean, the team in general wasn't like the best. Like, I mean, they were good. They were
Yeah,
good.
they
Don't
went
get me
like
wrong. Fifth
5-1
place.
or 6-1 or
Yeah,
something like
fifth
that.
fifth place. But
Yeah.
I mean, apart like him and Asenge, kind of they were kind of like a dynamic duo together. I think he passed a lot to him, and I think with the competition that there was in that tournament, it was easy to kind of maybe game plan around him because he was kind of like the number one guy, number one prospect to keep an eye on before the tournament started. But I think there were a few mistakes, but I do kind of come out of it still thinking a bit positive.
All right, let's go with some younger guys. Hugo Yimga Makuri, born in 2008. He averaged like 15 points a game over 2 tournaments, shot over 50% from the floor, good rebounder, looks like a grown man. And me and my brother had this debate. Is he like the European version of Tyron Stokes? Guys that are just physically more mature and gifted than players their age. But he's a guy that I think has a bright future, especially once the skill level catches up with the just the physical attributes. What made you put him on this list as your top 5 or 6 guys from this summer?
Just the fact of how dominant he was playing a year up. So he was born in 2008, we're saying he played in U17s, and he was the best player on the team. Again, that was the team that wasn't too great. I think they ended up 11th in the tournament.
Like the only
I think
French team that didn't win, right?
yeah, I mean it's mostly due to the fact they didn't have like a real point guard on the team, I think. I think they had some guys, but there weren't any set real point guards. But he was the best player on the team. One thing that really stood out to me is his motor. I think he averaged 6 rebounds. I think 4 of them were offensive rebounds. He's insanely physical. He's big. He's athletic, and he's one of those guys that I think once, again, like you said, once the skill catches up, he'll be like he'll be set. I think he's been playing pro since he was 14 in the NM1, which is the third league in France, I believe.
Yeah.
Like Pole France, I think, or Pole France is it's kind of like the G League Ignite a bit, and people don't really talk about it because they're playing in a minor league with full pro players,
Yeah.
as but the guys are like from 14 to 17 years old.
Yeah, I
So
had a
I think it's fun.
chance I want to say last September, October. I went and watched Pole or Incep. I don't even know what is the difference, but to me, it's the same thing. But I went and watched them play, and I saw Hugo play. He didn't have like the greatest game, but then just kind of looking back at it, like dude is like 14. I think he's like 15. And there were guys like grown men that they were playing against that like drove themselves to the game and so on. But yeah, the upside is really intriguing. Reluctant shooter, doesn't want to shoot jump shots, often will pass up a jump shot to get to the basket. But he can score 15 points a game just off his athleticism, his motor, being at the right place at the right time. He's 6'8". Now he doesn't look 6'8", but I've seen him listed at 6'8". And I know last year after I went to the game, I had a chance to talk to him briefly, but I mean it was the language barrier, so couldn't talk too much. But he did spend his summer here in Dallas. I didn't get a chance to go watch him work out, but there's some rumors that he was looking to transfer, go to school here in the States. I don't know what exactly happened with that, but is he your number one prospect in 2008, the 2008 generation?
My number one international prospect. I'm not exactly sure what the American class 2008 looks like too much, but from doing my research in the international scene, he's my number one guy, my number one international prospect in 2008.
Yeah, with the Americans, it's kind of hard to figure out who was born in 2008 and
Hmm.
what classification they are. At least with Europe, I think it's very clean and simple. The year you were born in, that is your generation. Wow. I mean, I guess when they come over to the States, like you got some guys that are 2006 born that are in high school this year. Then you got some guys that are 2006 that are freshmen. But I want to talk about Nathan Soliman. Now, he's a guy that I think there is some unfair pressure on him because he's been compared to Victor Wembanyama. There's only going to be one Victor. I started hearing the buzz. I don't know if it was last year or the year before. Maybe he was like 12 years old. I think he's 2009 born generation, which makes me feel really old when we're talking about guys born in 2009. Again, I think he's going to be really good. I don't think he can live up to the Victor hype and expectations, but what are your overall thoughts on him as a long-term prospect?
For him, again, we were introduced to him in the Adidas Next Generations tournament as a guy who was a key contributor to the team. And he was a key contributor in U17s as a 2009 prospect. So that's kind of crazy to me. Already, he was like top five contributor on that team, averaged, I believe, 7 and 5, something like that, 2 steals, shooting 50% from the field and three. On low usage, obviously, played 15 minutes a game, but he's an impact player. You know, when you see him play, you don't say, "Oh, well, this guy is probably like 14 years old." You think of like, "Well, this guy, he has the frame, he has the defensive, or the positional defense. He has really smooth shot, like his jump shot looks good, and I mean, just his offense is very fluid, very fast. So that's something I've noticed the most about him. But again, there's one Victor, there's only one, but I think he has a chance to be a really key figure in the future of French basketball, I think.
Yep. All right. When we return, I want to dig a little bit deeper into Nathan Soliman. I want to talk about French basketball going forward. And then we have one more prospect that we need to discuss. But before we get into that, we got to talk about the sponsor for today's episode, which is FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. And you heard us talk about FanDuel a lot. Well, we have something different for you. Now, through September 22nd, you only have a few days left. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of the NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, when you get a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel at any time. So just visit fanduel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, last segment. Wanted to go a little deeper into Nathan Soliman. So he your #1 international prospect in 2009?
I don't think I have too
Uh-oh.
many people in 2009, but but I would say probably yes. I'm not
Okay.
exactly sure with 2009. The only 2009s that come to mind right now are him and Fabian Kaiser
Yep.
from Germany. But I mean, if I had to think off the top of my head, probably yes. But yeah, I think that's yeah, I think he'd be the number one guy in
Yeah, I think
2009
so.
internationally.
When you were hesitating, I was like, "Oh, is there somebody else that you have?" All right, let's for those that are listening and have not seen his game, or even Hugo, can you describe their game in the best way you can? Paint the picture to those that are listening about what each prospect looks like.
All right, so Hugo is 6'8", like we said, high motor, big athlete, runs to the rim, athletic finisher, pretty efficient scorer, but reluctant shooter. And Nathan Soliman is a lot more finesse based, like than athletic. He has a really, really nice shot at his age. And I mean, it's not the highest usage because he is younger, but it does look pretty smooth and he just moves really fast. He's him too. He's like 6'7" at 14, 15. Still room to grow, probably gonna get around to 6'9" ish, possibly. But both of those guys are going to grow together to be a really, really fun forward duo. They're already really close from what it seems. They played
Yep.
together in France. They
Mhm.
moved up together in the rankings to play with older teams together. They played together in INSEP, but I think that's kind of the base around them.
Let's just think long term. What are their NBA roles? And I know it sounds crazy to talk about guys born in 2008, 2009 as NBA prospects, but this is locked on NBA Big Board. What do you
Mm.
see, like, if you just had to project their future roles? What do you see their roles in the NBA?
I want to be careful with this comparison because it's not the most similar, but it's like the frame, talking about the frame and the athleticism. Hugo kind of reminds me of that RJ Barrett type of frame type of player. I don't know if that makes sense. The RJ Barrett's, maybe Andrew Wiggins. I mean, Andrew Wiggins was on a different level as a prospect, but like that type of forward that they're athletic, they finish well, they become good defenders, they can stretch the floor. Maybe not on the highest volume, but that's kind of what I see for Hugo. Nathan, I have to watch a bit more of him to kind of discern what he's going to be like, but I think he'll be a good shooter. I think he's has the tools to become a good shooter. He's already a high level shot creator at his age. And I think eventually he'll become kind of like a shooter. If he gets that 3-point down, I think he has the potential to be a pretty lethal shooting option on an NBA team.
Yeah, if you think about it, they may be able to play U19s like 2 more times. Is that correct?
Yeah, like that's kind of what I was thinking about recently because the U18 team that's going into U19s this year for France are probably going to lose Nolan and Noah to the draft. I'm
Yep.
assuming, I think it's after the draft, so they're going to lose them to the draft, and then there's no other real kind of scoring option on that team apart from some other guys that are decent, Bérenger and Leon Severlin, like some guys like that. But I think they're probably going to be moved up to play in the U19s, or at least Hugo for sure is. And I mean, we'll really have to see. They have some other guys that they can bring up, but I think they'll have the chance to be playing internationally for a long time.
Yep. All right. There's one more prospect, and I'm going to let you say his name. There's one more prospect that really caught your attention this summer, and you think he is an intriguing long-term NBA prospect. Andre
Bjelic,
Bjelic.
Bjelic, Andre Bjelic is a guy I really came away impressed during the U16s. Serbia came in third place, and this guy averaged 18 points, I think like 18, 4 and 4, something like that, being the second leading scorer in the tournament, and had some absolutely ridiculous performances, including this game where he had 30 points, shot 8 of 9 from three, with shooting it from way beyond the arc. And when you look at U16s, I think it's important to kind of like note that scouting is a long game. I think guys that perform in the U16s don't necessarily end up becoming always the best prospects. Like if you look back, I had seen this post of the last MVPs, last 9 MVPs of the FIBA U16s, and I think there might be like one of them that's still in the league, or one of them that made the league. But
Was that like the list that had like John and Musa on it? Was it
yeah,
that list? Okay.
yeah, that list with there was Usman Garuba that I
Yeah.
could think of off the top of my head, uh, Mario Saint Superi actually,
Yeah.
and
I
some
like
some
him a
other
lot.
guys. Yeah, I like him too. I want to see kind of how his role looks at Manresa first, but I'm kind of easing into him as a prospect. But Bjelic himself is a guy that he's a three-level scorer. For him, the key trait that I looked at was the shooting. The shooting really impressed me. I think he shot 37% from three on 8 attempts. And he's a 6'4" combo guard playing for Real Madrid, with Real Madrid losing Igor, Midar Baznakovic, and Ismail Adian. I think that's how you say it.
Yeah.
Uh, they need some guys to fill in their shoes, and they brought in Andre Bjelic, who was playing for their U16 squad, I believe. Him alongside some other guys, but I think in their first scrimmage he did really, really well. Can get 21 points, was a leading scorer on their team, and I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be more of a centerpiece when we're talking about international basketball in a few years. I think that's kind of as the guy on Real Madrid or one of the guys on Real Madrid, and I think
Yeah.
it's a good look for him for now to have performed this well in the tournament.
I was going to say one of the guys. I went to like their U12 and U14 game last year, and they're absolutely loaded with talent. It's a factory, and I've been to their facility, and it's better than half the NBA facilities. I mean, it's the football or soccer money that's funding it, but I mean, they have such a major advantage as far as like facilities and being able to share court next to the senior team. Now, that I will say that there may be some disadvantages in the sense because the team is so loaded, and they play in leagues with grown men, and sometimes guys can like you can see the difference between
Mhm.
like these grown men and this 140-pound point guard that is probably like dominating his age group, but now he's really struggling with the physicality. But I mean, Real Madrid has just been pumping out a lot of talent, and I think Real Madrid and like INSEP, like those two programs are just. I mean, you're going to see a lot of guys in NBA drafts that are coming from those backgrounds. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. We talked about some of the summer standouts. We did 2 Americans, we did 3 French prospects, and we went to Serbia with a guy, Andre B. Help me out.
Bjelic.
A guy that a lot of people haven't really been talking about, but Alec is really, really high on him. He's been talking about him on social media, and it's a name that I think you're going to hear down the line on this podcast. But before we go, I want to let you know that I appreciate each and every listen, and thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast, your first listen of the day. Now, again, remember to check out the Locked On NBA Podcast. It is where the local experts keep you updated daily on all the biggest storylines ahead of the season. You can find it on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, thank you. This is Rafael Barlowe, Alec Kichian, a.k.a. Mr. NBA Draft Point, the Twitter international scouting guru, and we are out of here.